Hello, guys. Welcome to my channel. This is Fanfic-Weeb. This series is about what if Percy runs away and became Dazai Osamu. Link in credit is in description. Before we begin this video, please like and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Now, let's get into the fanfic. Mori took me back to the room that I've been staying in for the past week to wait while he went to inform the higher-ups of the boss's passing. I immediately lay down on the bed, savoring the feeling. After my testimonial, I would be back on the street. Only for a little while though, death would soon follow, but that time spent there would still be uncomfortable. Mori came back for me sometime later. I tried reading his expression, but it was carefully hidden behind his kind doctor facade. He was keeping tight-lipped about the outcome of his talk. I wanted to tell the man to drop the act, but every conversation with him was a minefield where we were both planting deadly bombs in the other's mind. Every word was a chance to manipulate the other party, to turn them into your marionette while you played the puppet master. It was impressive, truly, until it was aimed at you. Mori led me to the office of one of the mafia's executives. I didn't know this man. There are 5 executives within the Port Mafia. An older man with a monocle, a lady with long red hair and more classical Japanese-style clothing, a foreigner with a permanent chill, and 2 others that I had yet to meet. The man sent me a harsh, appraising glare, and for a moment, I imagined just slitting his throat like Mori had done to the previous boss. The thought came unbidden. But the most startling thing about it was not how easy it would be for me to do with my training, but how little the thought seemed to affect me in that moment. I could have killed the man in cold blood. And I don't even know if I would have felt bad about it. Maybe everything good in me died with me when I jumped. Or maybe it was earlier than that. With the fire, I stood up straighter, pushing the thoughts from my head. Demigods killed monsters, not mortals. The man had short blue hair, pulled into a ponytail at the base of his neck. His eyes were an eerie blue-green that seemed to almost glow as he stared at me. He held out his hand and introduced himself. Though I didn't listen to his name, I was too focused on the way my ability showed itself when our hands met. "Mr. Osamu," the man said in a haughty tone, using my first name freely without permission. "I'd ask that you not use an ability in here." The man looked terribly offended with me. The hypocrite. I gave the man a smile that was all sharp teeth. "My ability is a passive one, sir," I explained, enjoying the way the man's confident expression turned into a complicated one. Passive abilities were dangerous. They were weapons without a sheath to protect others from being cut. The man coughed, alarmed. "What does your ability do?" I lowered my face, showing the executive a hooded glare. "My ability allows me to nullify all other abilities through touch." The man was sweating, like he was the one being interrogated instead of me. Messing with authority figures is the most fun I've had in a year. It only shows itself like that when it comes in contact with another active ability, I explained, stressing the word. Cheap tricks wouldn't get the man out of this one. I liked watching the way he squirmed under my gaze. There was something dangerous in the interaction, something alive. "What's your ability name, Mr. Dazai?" cut in, before the man could finish his sentence. "My name is Dazai." The man nodded and tried again. "What's your ability name, Mr. Dazai?" No longer human, but my theory was right about the origin of abilities. Then I really wasn't all that human. I was more god than human, more monster. That was the main reason I didn't fight Mori when he proposed the name earlier this week. It seemed Mori could feel the otherness in me too. The man gave a stiff nod, seeming to find the name appropriate as well. "I'm sure I didn't look all that human to him right now. I just need your account from tonight and then you can go," he explained. The man sounded ready to be rid of me and never see me again. The feeling was mutual. The faster I got out of here, the faster that I could die. The doctor, Mori-san, and I went on our nightly visit to the boss's room. When we got there, the boss seemed a little erratic, more so than normal, I explained. The thing about lying was that the best ones were always a masterful balance between lies and truth, enough of one to cover and support the other. He wanted to make sure that he had a proper successor. He could feel his time running out. I lied, keeping my face the same careful blank. He named Mori-san his successor just before going into convulsions. Mori-san acted quickly and performed a tracheotomy. But it was too late. I finished. That was a part of the lie that we had come up with to cover why the boss's neck had been slit. The executive excused me after writing the story down, double-checking the finer points with me before letting me go. Mori was waiting for me outside the executive's office, with what appeared to be a proud look on his face. Though if he was proud of skill to lie, or his plan succeeding at that moment was unknown, but if I had to guess, it would be the latter. We walked down the hall to the elevator, heading to the doctor's office. I automatically moved to my spot at the stool while Mori collapsed at his desk. A thought grazed my mind as we sat there in silence. Mori was poring over a set of lab results that came in before we left to go kill the boss. His face held a disappointed expression, but his body language gave him away. The doctor held the paper like it was a piece of gold. Mori-san called, pulling the man out of whatever spiral he was diving deep into. Yes, Dazai-kun? He looked up at me, placing the paper carefully on the desk. Seeing his whole face was even worse. Whatever was on that paper made the doctor look like Tantalus, a starving man presented with food, but was unable to eat it. He looked so disgustingly human at that moment. That executive, what was his ability? I asked, letting curiosity overcome my revulsion. Mori smiled, leaning back in his chair. He was doing that face where he was deciding how best to phrase his words, what information to give and what information to make me guess at, always testing my brain to see just how fast I could make it work. It's called the Lost Hero, he finally said. The ability allows him to wander into your recent memory when he touches you, Mori explained, though he doesn't remember what he's seen. Only when you tell him what happened does he get brief flashes of the past, so it's almost like an amnesia ability. I nodded my head, understanding now why he was the in-house interrogator. Is that why you walked me to my room before going to his office, so you could draw out some sort of time limit? Mori gave me his small, proud smile, the one that he always gave me when I did something intelligent that he liked. Correct, he confirmed. The look of the doctor's face changed, like a thought had just occurred to him. I knew him well enough by now to know that that look was complete bullshit, nothing more than a clumsy facade to fool lesser men. Mori never did anything, never said anything if he hadn't already thought through all of the details of it. He never shows when he gets an idea. Dazai-san, he started, leaning forward to garner attention. What if you stayed here with me, in my care until you find a suitable way to kill yourself? He proposed. I know that he's playing me, that whatever motive he has for doing this has to do with those test results. Probably something to do with me having a more potent concentration of the original mutated ability gene. And maybe even a little bit to do with the encroaching loneliness that will take him away once the only other person that knows the truth of our crime is gone. Even so, my only other option was to leave here and try killing myself again. Though suicide attempts would undoubtedly happen either way, at least here had more access to resources to do so. Back on the streets, I would starve again, something much more painful than I'd originally thought it was. I could always try my luck at jumping again, but last time I fell from a deadly height and didn't even break a single bone. This offer was easier. It was a cheap way out. but still, it was easier than going back to the slums. Despite my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. To celebrate Mori's successful promotion, he took me out to eat. Being a doctor among mafioso is a lonely profession, he explained when I asked why it was just the two of us. When you are always the one cleaning up their messes and not out there causing them alongside them, an invisible barrier seems to form. Some people might have thought he was crazy, but strangely, I understood what he meant. Going back to school after spending my first summer at camp, going back into the world of mortals, it felt like I no longer belonged among them. In the end, the only friend that I made there was Tyson, my half-brother, and a Cyclops. Mortals were out of the question. However, ability users felt different. Each of them were off in some way. It was like you had to give something up to gain an ability in return, but it was this strangeness that made being around them slightly more tolerable than being around mortals. Though being around either group still felt like its own brand of torture. We sat at the table with our food before us. I ordered some crab, finding it to be one of the few meals that I liked, but even as I sat there eating it, I could only eat so much. Mori gave me a pitying look. It told me that he knew that when Elise found me about to kill myself and on the brink of starvation, that eating would be a problem from thereafter. I tried to push the food away, but his look morphed into something else. It told me that we wouldn't leave this table till I finished all the food on the plate like he already had. I'd shoved the last piece of food into my mouth when my gag reflex finally kicked in. I ran to the bathroom, throwing up the entire dinner. I'd know that I would regret staying with the doctor. I'd just not anticipated the regret coming this early. Not even a full night later, over the following year, I found myself regretting my rescuing to stay. Though I know that Mori probably would have never had let me just up and disappear or die, since I was the only other witness to the old boss's death. Dying of starvation while I had the chance would have been better than the nightmare that became my reality. Things started off easy after that first night. I got to keep my room in the Mafia building, and Mori became something of a mentor to me. There was no real word to what we were to each other, but that would be the easiest one, I suppose. I'm not his ward, or an orphan that he picked up off the street with the purpose of keeping. I'm not his medical assistant either, like we told everyone I was at first. I was just the boy that he found and used to kill the old boss, but gave a place to stay when done. The doctor let me read all of his medical books, going as far as to quiz me on their contents to make sure that I understood their contents. He taught me how to play chess and Go, two games that require great strategy. We only played them a few in those early days. The games became boring in their simplicity. Not long after that, Mori gave me control of the jewels business, wanting to see what I could do with the struggling trade. I had new strategic systems in place by the end of the first month, turning something close to a money pit into one of the Mafia's most profitable assets. But with all things good, they don't last long. The test began the second month that I was with the Mafia, not a formal member, but still with them. My blood had a much higher concentration of the original gifted gene than any other ability user that Mori had seen. He began experimenting that month, seeing how different things would react to me, trying to activate something within me. He always said the shots wouldn't hurt, but every one of them hurt more than the last. They burned their way through my body, fighting me every step of the way. I didn't tell Mori that they wouldn't work. He'd never believe me if I did. Ho wouldn't even believe me if I told him the reason they wouldn't work was because of my being a demigod, if I told him about Olympus. So I took the pain. The test continued for months on end. By the time Mori had done everything that he could currently think of, every last test his twisted brain could conjure, every experiment, poisoning, blood test, treatment, he could think of, The pain didn't even register anymore. It was during that time that Mori moved me out to the middle of a landfill. The place was a dumping ground. Toxic chemicals could be found throughout the site. Even the rats knew better than to come in here. At the heart of the landfill was a lone storage container that Mori gave to me. Despite this, I couldn't bring myself to care. Not about the shipping container, or about the test, about anything at all. I just wanted for it all to be over, for life to be over. Is that too much to ask? The only thing that brought out any emotional response from me was death. Every attempt that I made, Mori somehow found a way to stop. Every painless method of suicide I could read about was negated by the underground doctor, but trying still brought me joy. Being stopped brought me anger. That was more than I could say for my normal, perpetual numbness. I'd been with Mori for about 4 months when the promise of a painless death became too elusive to keep pursuing. One night, when the driver dropped me off outside the landfill, I headed into the gate, but waited for the driver to leave before making way to a nearby hardware store. The store owner was just closing up, but the elderly man took one look at me, my clothing, demeanor, and unlocked the door in a rush. The port mafia was weaker now than it had ever been, but it was still feared by those who remembered its viciousness. I grabbed a piece of long rope, shoving some money into the man's hands on the way out. The bag swung bently from my bandaged wrist as I made my way back to the place that Mori decided I should call home. The night whispered softly, an unheard calmness spreading through the darkness. Yokohama is a city of demons. For the night to be so quiet, it felt like the city itself was holding its breath. I walked to the center of the landfill, my storage container waiting patiently for my arrival. The door swung open easily, revealing my meager possessions: a bed, a fan, a chair, a desk, and a lone light bulb hanging from the ceiling of the container. Most people would find the sight sad, but I didn't need much. Nothing more than the basics. Tucked away into the bottom drawer of my desk was my book bag, untouched and neglected during my time here. On top of the desk was the only book that I own other than my sketchbook, The Complete Guide to Suicide, something that when I had bought it, I had never planned of using, but haven't gone a day without reading it since. Stepping onto the desk and the papers that lined it, I took the rope out of the bag. There were some hooks lining the middle bar of the container. If I stretched out enough, I could just barely reach them. I fashioned a quick noose. Copying the instructions from the book, I strung it up on the nearest hook and jumped down from the desk. My chair sat in the middle of the container, below the light bulb. I rolled the object over a little bit, placing it directly below the noose. My hands went to my neck, unfastening the bandage laying there. With the bandage on the floor, I stepped onto the wheeled contraption. The rope was harsh as I slipped it onto my neck, tightening it to the point that breathing hurt. This pain, the pain that I cause myself, never decreases in its intensity. It's always fresh, reminder that I'm still alive. Curse. The chair shook dangerously below me, threatening to roll away at any moment. I smiled at the thought and gave the chair a small nudge. My body dropped from its height, but the rope was short enough that I dangled above the floor, feet never touching. The air slowly left my lungs, being exchanged for an all too familiar pain. I've been raised on pain. From starvation, glass bottles hitting me, bullies, monsters, Mori. This pain felt like coming home in a strange way. It greeted me, seeing me off just as it has seen me through everything else. I wonder if this death will feel like it did all those months ago. The peace that came with dying. One last strangled gasp of air escaped my lips as the world slipped into darkness. The drachma in my pocket weighing heavy, the pain slipped away, the feeling of the rope cutting into my neck no longer noticeable. Finally, my eye opened, harsh light entering it abruptly. A heavy weight settled in my chest as I recognized the ceiling, the lights, the pain coursing through my neck as I breathed, disappointment settling on my shoulders like the weight of Atlas holding up the world. I'm alive. There was a scribbling sound somewhere in the room. I didn't have to look to know what I'd see. A middle-aged man in a white lab coat doing some type of paperwork at his desk. I started to sit up, fully prepared to just walk out of the room and go to work. But something stopped me. Something is off. My arms grazed the covers of the bed. It was soft. I managed to sit up, only to be met with an all too familiar sight. My arms layered delicately at my side, bare for all to see. The damaged, scared and injured skin out in the open as if on display. The air hit my body, bringing in an unfamiliar feeling. I lifted my hand to my neck, only to be met by a burning sensation. It was bare as well. The rope cut deep enough that it tore into the skin. Scar will be left there, explained a pitiless voice. Mori. I turned to the man, dropping my hand into my lap. He was already looking at me. The only bandage that seemed to remain on my body was the one covering my right eye. Everything else felt raw from overstimulation. I glared silently at the man as I always do every time Hentworth's one of my suicide attempts. I've been here for months, struggling to die, wanting nothing more than to leave this pointless life. There was no reason to continue it. I had no goal or purpose. Anything that caught my attention became boring too quickly to be worth the time I spent on it. There was no point in even looking for a reason to live anymore. Nothing would fill the hole in my chest where a human heart should be. You know, I started, feeling the intense rasp in my voice, but continuing anyways. I'd sign a DNR if I thought there was a chance that you'd respect it. I swung off the table, glancing around the room for the jacket that Mori had given me my first week with him. It was sitting folded up on my usual chair on the other side of the room. I walked over there, feeling Mori's eyes tracking my every move. I snatched the coat up the second it came into reach, draping it over my shoulders, never fully putting it on. Putting it on all the way felt like signing a contract, promising that this was permanent. I resisted the urge to sigh as my arms were hidden in the oversized coat, away from the world to see. Bandages? You'll get them back in 3 days. I nodded and left the room. Pain meant nothing to me anymore. It was just something that I tried to avoid, knew how to inflict, and ignored when I came in contact with it. Mori resorted to taking things from me instead when I messed up like this, when I acted pathetic, when I let emotion impart my judgment. He took things when I tried to pretend to be human, something we both knew I'm not qualified to be. This is hopeless. I watched as Mori seemed to be having a battle of the wills with the documents in front of him. The man's once clean clinic was in complete disarray. More stethoscopes than I thought we owned were scattered across the room. Medical files and other documents were placed hazardously on any flat surface that could be found, and the once orderly academic books were in no better shape. Mori himself was no better. His lab coat hadn't seen the dry cleaners in quite some time. His hair was a half-combed mess, and dark eye bags stuck to the man's face as if permanently glued on. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for the man, though. He was just another monster in a city full of them. Another evil playing at being human. Just like me. Our weapon smugglers are 2 weeks behind schedule. My men are going to be fighting with kitchen knives at this rate. And it doesn't stop there. We've already had 3 violent incidents this month where the city police had to be involved. I'm losing control of the low-level grunts, the man complained. Mori has only been the leader of the Port Mafia for a year, a position that I helped put him in. The doctor was still new to leadership, but familiar with the various hardships. The sight of him struggling like this brought me a slight bit of joy, as it always did. Though the overly common sight has started to become rather dull with time, just like everything else. The man continued to complain, going on about losing contracts for the protection business. The escalating conflicts and the steadily increasing loss of the Port Mafia's turf. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. What do you think, Dazai? Are you even listening to me? I stared down at my beaker and the glass stirrer in it, watching the way the chemicals move. I was always listening, something that he seemed to know and fear. Maybe not, I said, not giving the man any help. My bandages brushed reassuringly against my skin, a familiar weight. So which is it? Mori questioned, like a high school girl asking about a crush. This man is wasting my time. Come on, Mori. Everything that comes out of your mouth is always so boring, I complained, messing with the new medicine bottle. Mori's gotten so predictable over the year I've been with him. It's starting to sound like you're chanting a mantra. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough intel. My men don't trust me. You knew from the start that things would turn out this way. Another reason I couldn't feel sorry for the doctor. It was one thing to bring something on yourself by accident, another to do it purely on purpose. Well, maybe you're right. Mori sighed. The man suddenly stared at me as if realizing something. By the way, Dazai, why are you mixing hypertension medicine with hypotension medicine? Huh? Because maybe something cool will happen, and I'll be able to die in peace. I know that my mixing the hypo and hypertension medicines won't kill me, but maybe it will at least be interesting. That isn't going to kill you. How did you even get into the medicine cabinet? It was locked. Mori snatched the new bottle from my hands before sighing deeply. At this rate, I might kill him before I kill myself. Give that back. I want to die. I reached for the bottle, but he just moved it farther out of reach. Life is so boring. I'd rather die, but I want it to be quick and painless. Help me out, Mori. I'll teach you how to properly mix drugs if you promise to be a good boy and stay out of trouble. Good boy? Gods? You make it sound like I'm nothing more than a misbehaving dog asking for a treat. Liar, I screamed, calling the sadistic man out. You're just saying that so you can use me. Do you have any idea how much you've put me through this year? And what did you teach me? Nothing. Everything I've learned in the year that I've been here, I've taught myself. Anytime he stepped in to quiz or direct me, he controlled the information. Learning to mix chemicals and medicines was off the table. Outright teaching me strategies was a no-go since I wasn't officially a part of the organization. I haven't had any real combat training since I was 13, back at camp, nearly 2 years ago. My body has grown weak from all the failed attempts and experiments that I don't even know how well I would fare in combat. The only thing he has done was use me for his own gain, use my brain to further his own ends. I'm gonna quit this organization and join one of our rivals. Now, learn to think before you speak. Your death won't be quick or painless if you betray us. Mori smiled darkly. Trust me, I know. That's the only reason I haven't up and disappeared months ago. I'm so bored. Why's the world such a boring place? Everything and everyone are so predictable. Nothing of interest ever happens. I swung my legs like a small child. Nothing beyond what I expect has happened. Everything is boring and repetitive. Even Mori's betrayal wasn't unexpected. Everything is too predictable. More importantly, Dazai, you were the only one there when I inherited the previous boss's position. Other words, you are the sole witness to his final will and testament. I can't have you ying on me. Of course, always tracking back to that day. Mori seemed to believe that we were tied together from some string of fate. He seems to have forgotten that I was supposed to be an expendable piece for him to throw away. It didn't work out like you planned though, I told the doctor with a startling clarity. The man's eyes gleamed slightly in confusion at my remark. What do you mean? He was subconsciously leaning forward. I have him. Choosing someone who's attempted suicide to be your accomplice was an excellent idea, but here we are, an entire year later, and I'm still alive. And that's why that deep-seated fear is still eating at you. I could see the moment Mori's blood seemed to turn to ice. Something like the word miscalculation was ringing in his ears, haunting him for months now. This man has hurt me more in a year than anyone else has managed to do in my entire life. He punished me, trying to break me because I was still alive, and yet he wouldn't let me die. He feared my existence, and yet wouldn't let me end it for the same reasons. What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about. You're afraid that someone will find out that you assassinated the previous boss. You're terrified of it. I kept my face emotionless, making my thoughts impossible to read. I could see the fear tearing away at Mori, controlling him. I wanted to reinforce that fear, let him drown it. After all, it's only fair to share the pain. What do you mean it didn't work out? I watched as Mori's brows furrowed, looking at me as if I was an imprudent child. Was this how the gods looked at me when I sent them Medusa's head? Nothing fell short of expectations. You and I successfully carried out the mission 1 year ago. It wasn't without hardship, however, which is exactly why I never want to do something like that again. The mission isn't over yet, I reminded the boss, staring him down with a cold gaze. It only ends when everyone involved in the assassination and fabrication of the boss's final testament have been silenced, permanently, right? I could see the emotions rolling through Mori. I stared the man down, seeing every late-night worry and fear that had crossed his mind. The way he's fretted over what he would do if I decided to sell him out. I could see it all. To the end, I was the perfect accomplice. Nobody would suspect a thing. Once you became the boss, after I vouched for you, I could simply kill her myself for some unknown reason. My eyes bored into him, watching the way he squirmed beneath my gaze. Bringing this man pain was like some kind of divine retribution. I could see the alarm bells ringing through the old man's head. With it, his regret in choosing me. My actions were too unpredictable. My mind twisted, observant, cold, calculating, and dark. The mafia is full of the most evil in the Yokohama district. Even among them, I have no true equivalent. Mori knows this, he fears this. I'm kidding. I was just making stuff up because I get a kick out of watching big shots like you squirm. It's what I've been doing to keep myself entertained lately, told the doctor, slipping back into my usual blank expression. The sea is always changing, forever unpredictable. As a child of the sea, so was I one moment. I'm the smartest man in the room, but as soon as everyone believes they have it figured out, I'm raving about suicide once again, wearing away at the people's minds like the ocean against the shore. You remind me of someone, Mori said suddenly. Who? I asked, curiosity lacing my tone. Mori has never compared me to anyone, not when I was as strange as I am. Mori didn't answer the question. How annoying, I thought bitterly. At any rate, stop teasing your elder, Mori scolded, a faint smile scaring his face. I knew better than to trust any smile of his. Me? Permanently silence you? Don't be ridiculous. Besides, I would have done that long ago if I really had wanted to. It'd be simpler than breathing. How many times have I stopped you from killing yourself this year alone? It's quite taxing. You know, I even disarmed a bomb under your chair once like the protagonist in a movie. I smiled slightly at the memory. He was sweating bullets that day, working furiously away at the device. I'd just been hoping it might take us both out at once, so I could ask Uncle Hades about throwing Mori away into the fields of punishment. Or Tartarus. Once I crossed the river Styx, there was always a coin tucked away in my coat pocket for that very journey. Dazai, if you really want, I can prepare a drug so that you can end things comfortably, Mori claimed suddenly. I watched as he opened a desk drawer, pulling out a sheet of paper, shifting writing on it. Really? I asked, my disbelief obvious. I didn't believe what the man was saying for a second. He'd just been complaining about the work it's taken to keep me alive not 5 seconds ago. Now this. I need you to do a quick investigation for me in return though, Mori said, still writing. It's not a difficult task, nothing dangerous, but you're the only one I can go to for help. Sounds fishy. I eyed the man reproachfully. Whatever he was scheming wouldn't end in my death, but I could make him keep his word. You know Suribachi City, near the Yokohama settlement, correct? The man asked, rolling right over my previous remark. Mori never asked about my past. He had no true knowledge about where I was before I came to him. He only had theories and assumptions if he cared to think about it even that much. He probably at least assumed that I was from the Earth. There have been rumors that a certain individual has been seen in that area. I'd like you to go there and check if the rumors are true. This, Mori said, indicating the paper that he had been writing, is called a silver oracle. It's a decimation of authority. You could say this to anyone in the port mafia, and they will do whatever you asked. Use it wisely. I glanced between Mori and the document being held out to me, then asked, who is this certain individual you want me to look for? I think I already know, but hearing it from him would be better than going in half blind. Not that that's not the case already. Guess, Mori said simply. I couldn't help but sigh. People were so tiring sometimes. I don't want to guess. Just guess. I glared at the underground doctor for a moment, but that got me nowhere. I replied slowly to the annoying man. There's no way the most powerful man in the port mafia would give a second thought to some town gossip. That stays a lot about just how important this rumor is. Plus, you're giving me a silver oracle, which makes me think this individual isn't what's important. It's the rumor itself. You have to know the truth, and you have to quash the rumor at its source. Its spread alone is harmful. You asked me to investigate instead of a professional or one of your top subordinates. So there's only one person this individual could be. The previous boss. Right? Exactly. The man confirmed. There are some people who must never rise from the grave. I personally confirmed his death, even gave him the most exceptional funeral. I dug around in the kitchen the night before the funeral and found some whiskey. Sleep has always been a hard thing for me to come by, with the demigod visions and all. But even after leaving the mythological world, falling asleep was still a nightmare in itself. I drunk myself sleep that night and slept through the day. Mori had been pissed that I had missed the funeral, but that was the most sleep that I had gotten in years. I drank myself to sleep most nights that I could get my hands on something before going back to my storage container. Someone who must never rise from the grave, huh? I let the words hang for a moment before sighing and standing. Looks like I really am the only one that you can go to for help. I snatched the paper from Mori's claws. You're gonna get me that Dr. Ugg, then? Okay. You better keep your word. Or I'll make you, Winton said, and unheard by everyone in the room. The doctor smiled. This is your first job. Welcome to the Port Mafia. I made my way to the door, something close to eager to get this done with, when I stopped. By the way, who's the person you said I reminded you of? The man smiled cruelly before answering, his tone laced with something akin to melancholy and pride. Me. The word shook my bones, hurting what little soul I'd forgotten I had. I know that I'm similar to this man, but I didn't want to acknowledge the fact, much less have him openly do so. It was one of the many things that I just wanted to forget. Dazai, I may not be able to comprehend your answer, but I nonetheless want to know. Why is it you wish to die? I couldn't stop the puzzled expression from morphing my face. Isn't it obvious? Him asking me this is like me asking him why he wants to live. Something like youthful innocence to me over my eyes. My voice? When I finally answered, let's turn that question around. Is there really any value to this thing we call living? Suribachi City looked just like how I remembered it. Row after row of homes hazardly built into the crater in the earth, filling up the shape of a Japanese motor. A Suribachi, The people that live here are like I was. Like how I still am. They're society's outcast. They're the people society never acknowledged in the first place. The crater became a safe haven for those scorned by the rest of the world. A gray city for gray people. The entire area was out of the authorities' radar, making it perfect for illegal organizations like the Port Mafia. Oh, so drinking metal plating solutions is an extremely popular method of suicide abroad. Interesting. I was reading as I walked. I knew this area well after living here for so long. I could tell my expression was serious when it came to suicide. No matter how joking my tone, I was always serious. I continued reading, talking and thinking aloud as I did. Apparently, the method was only popular because it's an easy chemical for industrial painters to get their hands on. The death itself is neither quick nor easy. Anyone who drinks the solution DES after spending hours in agony as their organs dissolve inside of them. Gods, who comes up with these ideas? I looked at the escort following me. Mr. Hirotsu. He was the mafioso that I'd chosen for his knowledge of the area. I may have lived here, but he knew the city's underground that I had tried to stay out of. The ability user had graying, salt and pepper hair and wore a golden monocle on one of his eyes. I could tell the man was wary of me. I could feel the unease almost rippling off of him. Everyone in the mafia that recognized who I was felt the same way as the man trailing behind me. I was one of two people present when the old boss passed. Now have the Oracle and a mysterious mission that no one else knew the details of. Hirotsu was right to be wary. We left the mafia building early this morning and have traveled the improvised city asking about the rumors since. I spoke to the sources while Hirotsu watched on. Many of the people we spoke with were easy to manipulate, telling me everything that I wanted to know without even realizing it. The more stubborn and aware ones I bribed, using the money that Mori had given me for that very purpose. When there was nothing else to gain from the city inhabitants, we started heading back to headquarters. Dazai, please don't walk too far ahead of me. A nervous Hirotsu called ahead to me. I'm your escort, but this is nonetheless a conflict zone. There's no telling what could happen. Conflicts? My head filled with wonderful scenarios of being taken out in a crossfire or attack. I hadn't thought of that before. My comment must have made it seem like I was either confused or uninformed, because he went into an explanation of the ongoing turf war between the Port Mafia, Takasakai, Gelhart Security Service, and another group that calls themselves the Sheep. This week alone, they led two of our squads. The unofficial leader is especially hard to deal with. They say not even bullets work on him. Oh, no wonder I heard explosions and gunfire coming from over there, I said, pointing vaguely in a random direction. Doesn't make much difference to me, though, I grumbled, now bored once more. I knew all about the turf war from Mori's seemingly endless complaining. I knew about the sheep too, just not all from Mori. My phone beeped from inside my pocket, an annoying sound only associated with one equally annoying individual. I considered just letting the phone ring, but there was always the possibility that Mori would just turn around and call Hirotsu, and then I would still have to talk to him anyways. I spoke with Mori on the phone, giving the man a small rundown of what I'd learned. The previous boss was here. He came back to life from the depths of hell, covered in black flames. I told him emotionlessly. I could only imagine the way Mori's heart must be beating right now. How nervous he must be. The thought alone was enough to bring a cruel smile to my face. If someone from camp were to see me now, they'd probably mistake me for a human-like monster roaming the streets. What? Mori's shaky reply could be heard from the other side of the phone. There were a lot of witnesses. I guess the old man had a lot of regrets and couldn't let go of the world. My lips curled further into the cold-blooded smirk. Mori must be close to a panic attack by now. The good doctor had been hoping that these rumors were nothing more than a trap being set by another organization. This discovery was something he never would have thought to be possible. Of course, he didn't know shit about the world I come from. Demons rising up from the ether was nothing more than a simple Tuesday from demigods. At any rate, I'll give you a detailed report when I get back. Something hit me squarely in the chest, stealing the breath from my lungs and knocking me back, sending me flying through the air. My body flew through a roof, fencing, and other things. A path of destruction left in my wake. Pain ricocheted throughout my body with each hit. I could feel the spots that would soon be riddled with bruises. When I finally stopped, I was lying on the collapsed rubble of what had been a shed only moments ago and was leaning against another, intact, building. The shadowy figure that had hit was standing with his foot on top of my chest. When my vision finally became clear again, I saw a boy around my age standing above me. His blue eyes stared down into me, his fiery hair tousled gently in the breeze. I had the sneaking suspicion that if my breath was already ragged, it would have caught in my throat. Beautiful. I didn't hear what the teen said, too surprised by my own thoughts, but seemingly unable to deny them. The boy above me looked prettier than anyone I'd ever seen. He was wearing simple dark jeans and a dark green biker jacket zipped up all the way. I pushed the train of thought away. I didn't have time for something so distracting at a time like this. That hurt, you know, I told the boy emotionlessly, forcing my heart rate to go back to something close to normal. Mori and I had discovered in the past year that I could manipulate my heart rate. It was something that made situations like this and interrogations that much easier. I hate pain. I'm gonna give you a choice, kid, the boy said arrogantly, his hands tucked away into his jacket pockets. D now or D after. Given me the information I want. What's it gonna be? Something gave me the idea that whatever the boy had said was most likely an insult of some form. A smile threatened to show itself, but I forced it down. If this kid is who I think it is, then he'll have no problem keeping that promise. I like those choices. Both are very tempting offers, I replied, showing no signs of pain, despite having just been thrown through multiple buildings. Each breath hurt, but my time with the doctor allowed me to keep a level and clear head if nothing else. Okay. KO me now. The boy fell silent, obviously surprised. His expression morphed into an attractive expression of something akin to pleasure. He looked like he realized he had finally met someone of character. I felt the same. Almost. This boy is interesting, even more so if he's the skill user I'm thinking of. Thought you just cry and run away. You're a surprisingly gusty kid. You're a kid, too, I reminded him, enjoying the flash of annoyance that filtered across his delicate features. He looked stunning when he was angry. Yeah, everyone I fight always says that at first, but they immediately realize their mistake. I'm no ordinary brat like you, the ginger says, assuming things. I could see his hands clench in his pockets, turning into fist. Now talk. Tell me everything you know about this Arahabaki you're looking into. Arahabaki. I rolled the name around in my mouth. The boy stepped on my hand. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the rubble. He wanted me to talk. Does this bastard not understand that shit hurts? So you do know, huh? His voice was thick with surprise, but also an underlying hopefulness. How interesting. Nope. First I've ever heard of it, I told the teen flatly. The boy grinned, obviously taking joy in what he was about to do. He kicked me swiftly. I could hear the bones creak beneath the weight of his kick. A slight moan slipped from my lips as my body contracted in pain. I looked at the boy. Everything about him screamed someone who's never lost a fight. I won't assume to know what kind of pain he's been through or what kind of life he has lived, but with combat at least, he's never lost. I knew people like that. I know how they think. I also know very well how to piss them off. That has always seemed to be my speciality. You'll let me go if I talk? I let my face twist in agony. Not having to fake it, I let him believe that I'd given up, that he'd won. Yeah, I don't pick on the weaklings. So not a bully, then. That's good. My experience with bullies has never been good. It was bad enough to make me consider looking back on when my depression started, or if it had always been there. God knows there were enough reasons before I even found out that I was a demigod to justify the possibility. I fell silent for a few moments before gazing up at the boy. He really was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. Okay, I'll talk. I imagined the way he would look moments from now, enjoying the image that my mind conjured. My voice was heavy and tense when I finally replied, "You ought to drink more milk. You're really short." The boy kicked me in the stomach once more, sending me crashing into a fence. His face was flushed red from anger. It was a sight worth the pain. "I didn't ask, you little shit," the boy shouted angrily. "I'm 15, still growing." "Heh, then I'll put a little curse on you. Being 15 as well, will continue growing while you stay the same height." I don't know why I did that, but this interaction was fun, something that I hadn't had in years. Not really. "You're really starting to piss me off." "Good, be pissed. Hate me. Maybe that will make these foolish thoughts go away." The boy kicked me across the face, causing my neck to creak audibly, but there was no remorse on the ginger's face at all. "That hurt, you know?" I groaned, but a small chuckle made its way through. I looked at the boy, thinking aloud again, sure of my line of thought. Now, the sheep are a group made entirely of children and teens, and yet they are still one of the most feared. Now, it makes sense. You're the sheep king Chuya Nakahara, gravity manipulator. I thought he was since that first hit. The speed and power behind it was unreal. But I needed to gather more information before I just thoughtlessly said anything. "I'm not a king," Chuya spat. He said the title as if it was acidic. "I just happen to have something no one else does. Power? I'm simply fulfilling the responsibility I have." The boy paused as if realizing something, and looked down at me. "You sure do know a lot about the sheep." "I got invited to join a while back. Obviously, I refused. It was before the infection had hit. One of the members happened across me in the slums, offered me a safe place to stay, a group to be a part of, and a place to call home. The sentiment was nice, familiar even, but the boy was around my age and already drunk well before noon. I didn't want to be a part of an organization where the only one doing anything was the leader. I don't want to have to rely on anyone that much to be that defenseless ever again." "You made the right choice. I would have killed you in the first 5 minutes. I would have assassinated you before that," I shot back, readily. We stared at each other. "Doesn't matter," the gravity manipulator decided. "I'm still going to kick you to death." "You won't get that far," I told him, not even moving an inch. "Don't you hear the footsteps?" Chuya looked alarmed, but he didn't take his eyes off of me. "What footsteps?" Just then, numerous mafia soldiers appeared and pointed their weapons at the boy, but he only laughed. "Give it up, boy," Hirotsu demanded from the crowd. "You're far too young to see what your organs look like." I listened on as the two threw slighted comments at each other. "Chibi has such a foul mouth." "Hirotsu," I called out, interrupting the pair, "you should probably sit this one out. He can manipulate the gravity of anything he touches. Your skill is a bad match." But the man ignored my warning, and the two launched themselves at one another, tangling in combat. The pair moved like seasoned fighters in an arena. A part of me wanted to jump in there with Riptide, but the energy required to do so was needed somewhere else. The two fought each other, blocking and countering the other's attacks while countering with their own. It was almost like a dance, one that Chuya seemed to be leading, It was obvious just from watching that Hirotsu was at the disadvantage skill-wise. Every attack was turned against the man. This continued until Chuya aimed a kick at Hirotsu's neck, one which the man promptly blocked with his pistol. I could hear the way the device groaned from a few feet away, and was happy that it wasn't me taking that burden for once today. I saw Hirotsu grab onto Chuya's shoulder with his right hand, and knew his intention. Anything he touched with that hand, he could repel. "I've got you now," he said confidently. "So what? Your skill won't work on me." "I dunno about that," I chimed in. I'd used up my reserved energy and made my way over to the pair quietly when Hirotsu had set up the opportunity. I was right behind Chuya, smirking as he looked back at me. "Sorry, but gravity is no longer yours to control." My ability activated as I grabbed onto the side of the boy's neck, blue light shining through. "I can't use my powers?" He reminded me of a god made human and losing their abilities to control their domains. It was strange to see. A white shockwave blasted Chuya backward, almost like he'd been hit by a truck. I flew back too, a new wave of pain shooting through me. I wasn't thrown by Hirotsu's skill though. The old man called out my name, alarmed and confused. It made sense, since there was no reason for me to be all the way back here. "He got me," I explained sullenly, holding my thoroughly beaten stomach. "Kicked me right before we crashed, and I let go of him. He used his skill to fly backwards." Chuya called out something in triumph, but I wasn't paying attention to him. Everything hurts. The boy's kicks were a nightmare, especially since he had a knack for hitting the same spot each time. I saw blur as the boy launched himself at Hirotsu. It was a powerful enough kick that even if I got there in time to nullify Chuya's ability, the force alone would still tear the old man apart. But black flames blasted everyone backwards instead. People, buildings, utility poles, and even trees were blown away with the black shockwave. Everything was torn, as if the air itself had suddenly lashed out. A black explosion. My vision spun from the repeated force, heat cooking my skin, but when I could finally raise my body enough to look up, I saw it. Glowing red eyes, a face wrinkled, aged from the death and destruction its owner had caused. The long white hair was billowing in the wind. Standing in the flames was the devil himself. Someone even Hades must have struggled to find the right punishment for. The previous boss. My words were swallowed by the flames before the heat and trauma of the day became too much for even my body to handle. The last thing I saw before everything faded away was the black flames. I woke up sometime later in the small infirmary with fresh bandages lining my skin. There was a slight pain in my head and a dull ringing in my ears as I remembered the events from earlier. When I looked out the window, it looked to be the middle of the night, but my body felt rested. The fight and the explosion must have happened hours ago, knocking me out cold in the process. On my usual chair were two jackets, each identical to the other except one seemed a bit frayed from the blast. I slipped on the old one and carried the new one on my arm, since it was night right now. Everyone else in the building was either out working the night shift or asleep in their rooms. The halls were quiet as I walked through them. I could hear my almost silent footsteps and heartbeat in my ears as I made my way down to the front steps. I called one of the drivers while hobbling to the elevator. It was waiting for me when I got down there. When I got home, I called Mori, leaving a voicemail detailing my report to him. I threw the phone down on the bed, grimacing with the sudden movement. My entire body was unbelievably sore from the occurrences earlier today. But the worst of the damage seemed to lie in my arm. The appendage was done up in tight bandages over a heavy metal cast that I could guess the use for, though the good doctor did think to give me a sling, so that made the weight more bearable. As I lay down on the bed, feeling the way that my stomach protested the movement after the abuse it suffered from Chibi's kicks, I knew that if I were to undo my shirt, the entire area would be a deep purple, Getting to work on time tomorrow was going to be near impossible. I stood outside of Mori's office the next day, waiting for the right time to go inside. Chuya was brought in yesterday with all the other mafia members that passed out from the explosion. Apparently, he was brought over to Mori's office not too long ago. Randu was with him. The ability user was using his skill to keep the gravity manipulator in check while they were in there with the boss. The sub-executive could create subspaces at will. Anything within the space was under his control. Currently, they were being used to trap the small team. I could vaguely hear the conversation on the other side of the door. I think the ginger had just mentioned something about the Arahabaki that he seemed so interested in. Chuya's knowledge of a god whose origin is unknown was strange. It was definitely something that brought curiosity to me, as a Greek demigod in my own right. I opened the door, startling all three criminals present in the room. I swept my gaze over the room, taking in the necessary details. Chuya's arms were bound with leather straps. A chain was wrapped around his legs. His ankles were tied with industrial-grade steel wire that was attached to the floor at the other end. Even his fishes were tightly chained. Randu's subspace skill was active around the gravity user's torso, with the skill user standing not far behind him. Mori seemed to be simply sitting at his desk, observing the scene. "Excuse me, coming in, oh?" I pretended to be surprised, an act that didn't fool anyone in the room. Well, maybe Randu, but his mind is focused on other things right now. "Perfect," Mori said, his voice already grating on my nerves. "I was waiting for you. I bet you were." "Ah, you're that little twig from yesterday," Chuya exclaimed. I watched as the boy practically leaped in the air. Something told me that if he wasn't restrained right now, there would be a foot in my face. "You goddamn punk. Oh wow. You seem to be doing well." I, on the other hand, got inquired pretty badly. As you can see, I held up my right arm, showing off the thick cast. My head was also wrapped up in bandages from the explosion and beating. Not that you would really know since it was normally done up that way. Where does all that energy of yours come from anyways? Are you having a growth spurt? Or is that what happened to all the nutrients that were supposed to make you smarter and taller? Leave my height out of this. Damn it. I liked the way that he looked when he was angry. It was natural, without all of the false bravado. Fine. I suppose it's pretty tasteless to criticize others' shortcomings. After all, I'll never do it again. Pipsqueak. What can I say? Sarcasm and being generally sassy has how I've survived for years. "Why you, that's enough," Mori chided, clapping his hands together to garner attention. "You two really hit it off for just having met a day ago," he observed. Hit it off? What in Hades is this old man talking about? If this is what he considers hitting it off, then, in his deranged mind, he and I are probably best friends. At any rate, yes, Chuya, I would like to ask you about the explosion yesterday. Randu, could you leave the room for a moment? I watched as the skill user frowned, displeased with the idea. I cannot recommend that, boss. This boy is dangerous. Randu trailed off. There was something strange about his response, something that I couldn't help but be naturally suspicious of. It's fine. Mori waved his hand nonchalantly. Dazai can nullify his skill if it comes down to it. I already have measures in place just to be on the safe side. More importantly, Randu, you look colder and paler than usual. Are you alright? Randu had been acting strange for a few days now, staring off into space, shivering more than normal. Even for him, his behavior was strange. It's good that Mori finally noticed it before I had to point it out for the man. Randu was shivering even more violently than before, as if chilled by the question. I am embarrassed to admit it, but I feel like I'm about to freeze to death, the man admitted, looking away from Mori and I as if embarrassed. He's almost acting like a meek high school girl in front of a crush. But why? The ginger in front of him seemed to almost choke. You're cold? Chuya questioned, his disbelief audible. The teen cocked an eyebrow while glancing at Randu. The scene reminded me of when I'd first met Randu. I'm starting to think that this was just about everyone's reaction to the man. Wearing that? In this weather? Anyone could understand that small teen's reaction. The man's entire outfit was sturdily insulated all the way from the trench coat to the thick coat wrapped around his neck. There were warm earmuffs donning Randu's head, with tall leather boots going up to his knees. These were only what could be seen. I once saw him remove the coat to replace one of his dozens of heat packets lining his coat. Looking at the man, you'd believe that we were in the South Pole during a winter night's snowstorm instead of a warm office. I dressed lightly for the occasion, the man explained, uttering the sentence with ease, despite the fact that 13-year-old me would have choked hearing, so as not to offend the boss. But the man shivered. It's so cold. Randu's medical exam showed no signs of physical or mental illness, Mori explained to the baffled chibi. A part of me wanted to take a picture of the expression on the boy's face and use it as blackmail later on. But blackmail means having something to use in the future. Being in the future means having to live to that point, so the effort would be pointless, especially with the drug Mori promised. He simply hates the cold. I want to work somewhere warm. Boss, are there any port mafia branches near a volcano? The question made me wonder if the man was joking. However, Mori's response told me two things. Randu was not joking, and this wasn't the first time he's asked something like this. Afraid not, Mori said simply. I'll be taking my leave, as you wish. Randu released his skill, causing the glowing yellow cubes to dissolve before us. As he staggered off to the door, the three of us watched on as he left. I could tell that a part of the man was happy to go. The fire at his home seemed to be calling him. Can't say I blame the guy. Mori explained to Chuya that Randu was a sub-executive and an exceptional skill user, despite his strange appearance and behavior. But his explanation was predictably met with annoyed grumbling from the small skill user. An awkward silence seemed to stretch on after the explanation. I watched as Chuya stared boredly at the two of us. When I glanced at Mori, I found the man glancing vacantly around the room and at the two of us in it. Mori, do you think you can speed things up and cut to the chase? I asked, rolling my eyes. The silence was suffocating and annoying. Yes, of course. The mafia boss took a few more moments before finally speaking. Chuya, how would you feel about working for us? The urge to slap my hand to my face was overwhelmed by a loud roar tearing through the room. My already sensitive ears burned from the sudden noise. Jagged fissures spread through the floor around the angered redhead. Excuse me, came what sounded like a voice from the depths of Tartarus. If I hadn't already heard Kronos' voice myself, I would have thought that he followed me here to Japan, but the voice belonged to Chuya. The reinforced, bulletproof flooring was scattered across the room, some of it laying at my feet from Chuya's violent motion. Despite this, neither Mori nor I batted an eye. I'd know that this was coming sooner or later from the moment that I heard that the boy was in the mafia building. You drugged me all the way out here, just to listen to you talk out of your ass? The teen growled. Well, I can't say that I'm surprised by your reaction, Mori said blandly. I watched his and Chuya's interaction. Mori had the displeased look on his face that appears when he doesn't like the results from the medical test. But from what I can see, we're essentially after the same thing. Perhaps you might consider what we can offer each other before giving your answer. Chuya laughed dryly. Hilarious. I had no idea the mafia's new boss enjoyed wasting people's time like this. The boy sneered, going as far as to bare his teeth like a wild beast ready to tear their prey to shreds. Something about the hungry look in the teen's eyes reminded me of the Minotaur getting ready to charge at me and Ars swinging his sword at me when I was 12. It was the look of a killer, Of a monster. You want me to join the mafia? Don't tell me you forgot what your organization did to this city. You're referring to the previous boss's atrocities, yes? I, too, am pained by what he did, Mori replied sullenly. It was hard to read his expression to tell just how sincere his statement really was. The previous boss's actions were nothing short of a bloody tyranny that had plunged Yokohama deep into a sea of violence and terror of the likes that had never been seen before in the city. The tragedies that occurred under that man's reign were still fresh in everyone's mind. No one could forget the young boy killed just for scribbling on a car that happened to belong to the boss, or the housing complex whose water tank he'd ordered the poisoning of, killing everybody inside on the off chance that a rival organization's boss was hiding out there. Another day, he'd issued a notice detailing that anyone who spoke ill of the mafia would be killed, and that anyone who reported such talk would be rewarded. Yokohama became a tightrope city, everyone constantly watching their step around others, never able to trust anyone around them. By the end, over 1,000 people were executed, most of which were known at the time to be innocent. Nobody was safe from the terror that the previous boss had imposed, not even a 14-year-old child. I could still remember the blood on my hands, blood that for the first time was not my own. Everyone in the slums had been hit hard by the disease. Family members were gone, and with them went any income that they might have made by any means. The promise of a reward was too tempting for some people. Someone had sent a collector after me. It was a safe choice for them to make. I was a stray child that nobody would miss or seek revenge for. When the collector came for me, ready to kill me where I stood for a crime that I didn't even commit, I snapped. Riptide is made of a substance that can't hurt mortals, but the racks and rubble that had been laying around me were a different story. He'd been the first man, the first human, that I'd killed, an action that a child should never do, let alone repeat. When Mori had offered to kill the man that made me into a killer, even if only for survival, it had been easier to accept than I thought it'd be. Something that everyone learned in that time. Opposing the port mafia meant death. Disagreeing meant death. The merciless tyrant of the night and his army of death. That was how people called the port mafia. But the man is dead. I cared for him when he was sick and on his deathbed. The man said sternly, if there's such a rumor that this tyrant has come back to life, wouldn't you want to know if it's true, to help you sleep at night? Do you sleep at night, Mori? Do you sleep knowing that the boy you experimented on could spill your secrets at any moment? Knowing just how easy everyone would believe me since no one trusts you yet? Chuya stared at Mori with such a piercing glare that if looks could kill, he'd be dust right now. Still doesn't give you a good reason to push me around, Doc, Chuya said with a slight sneer. There's plenty of nasty rumors about you flying around as well, like how your predecessor didn't actually die of illness, but instead you killed him. The boy paused for a brief moment as if considering how far he could push it. Smart. Which you obviously did. Nobody with a functioning brain would believe that the old boss spent his final moments making his personal physician the next mafia boss. If I'm wrong, then prove it. Prove right now that you're not just another inspiring Grim Reaper with a lust for power. The boy stared Mori down. It was a brazen gaze that I thought suited him. A big part of me was impressed by how fearlessly he could say all of this despite his position. You can't, right? The doctor's assassination of the previous boss was a closely kept secret, especially within the organization itself. Only Mori and I knew the truth of that night with absolute certainty. It should be fun to see how the old man handles this. You're right. I can't prove it, Mori said, going as far as to shrug. Because the doctor looked at me. It was the face of someone planning to do something stupid. I noticed the change in his demeanor and opened my mouth to try and stop him before he got us both executed. But he'd already started talking again. Because I did kill my predecessor, I sighed heavily and covered my face with my good hand, dragging it slowly down as if to erase the words I just heard the annoyance utter. When I looked at Chuya, Chibi was quiet for the first time since coming here, as if he too couldn't believe what the idiot just did. I slit the great boss's throat with the scalpel, and made it look like he died from illness. What about it? The doctor's voice was completely calm as he said that. The way he spoke was like that of a younger sibling admitting to taking their sister's toy and not understanding why what he did was wrong. Or understanding, and just not caring. Neither his posture nor his expression changed very much, and yet the doctor felt like a completely different person. The being at the desk wasn't a man at all but a monster in human skin. A demon that would devour anything and anyone that got in its way. I watched as Chuya looked at the man, choosing to focus on the small man rather than the boss. I could tell that the boy was taken back by the sudden change. I didn't blame him. It was a shocking thing to see all the warmth leave the man's eyes, to see him transform into what could only be described as an evil incarnate. I'd grown numb to the sight over time, even learning how to replicate it. But for Chibi, I knew he could almost smell the death seeping from the doctor's pores. It was a transformation that had scared me too the first time that I'd seen it. Just about a year ago. You've got to be kidding me, Chuya said in a stiff voice. It was always hard to talk after feeling that for the first few times. He's just a timid doctor, they said. You make that old man seem like an unruly child. I appreciate the compliment, the doctor said, smiling as if talking to a patient. I was a smile that I knew well. Forget what I said about working for me. I'd like to ask that you work with us, share information. And if I refuse? The stubborn boy asked. I thought that Mori's answer would be obvious. Then I'll kill you, Mori said, as easily as asking for a pencil. However, that would require a lot of effort and resources. That's why I'll simply just have all your friends kill Ledger Sheep instead. How does that sound? The restraints on Chuya's arms and legs flew off, embedding themselves into the walls and ceiling. A slight jolt of surprise ran through me when I realized that most of that was brute strength from the small boy. The boy screamed something as he flew forward, closing the distance between him and Mori in a second. But I didn't pay attention to what he said. I was busy watching the way that Mori reached behind him, pulling out a small black communicator. He held the object between them, effectively stopping Chuya's incoming punch. So this was the countermeasures he spoke of. Hey, Chuya, help. You're there, right? A boy's worried voice could be heard from the earpiece. It wasn't a voice that I recognized, but it was one that Chibi obviously did. The Port Mafia's got us surrounded. Come on, hurry. Do something, anything, just like you always do. It's true then. The rumors that the sheep are reliant on Chuya, that they just go around making messes for the team to have to clean up, like you always do. The words left a bitter taste in my mouth. I could hear the click as Mori switched the device off. I could see Chuya's trembling fist pinned to his side. It was extremely simple, to tell you the truth, Mori sighed. They may be armed, but they lack finesse. The sheep, an organization holding Yokohama's prime territory, hell-bent on retaliation. Aside from you, they're nothing more than children with guns. I watched the teen's fist tremble even more, but there was no other movement in sight. No matter how much Chuya wanted to, he couldn't. He didn't have a choice but to stand there. As a leader myself, I can relate to how you feel. Who knew that the force known as the sheep was simply an overpowered king, and the hangers-on who can do nothing but rely on you for their survival? You bastard, the teen muttered through seemingly clenched teeth. I could tell that he was barely restraining himself from doing anything too drastic. What's with this fist? Getting in some exercise. I watched the way that Mori calmly prodded Chuya's raised fist. It had been slowly creeping up since Mori started laying in on the guy. A palpable tension hung through the air until Chuya slowly lowered it. I almost felt bad for the pretty boy. Not even a saint could go long without wanting to punch the man. Well, there you have it, Dazai, Mori said in a teacher's voice, smirking. Chuya is the most violently powerful person in the room, but in the mafia, violence and brute force are merely a couple of tools at our disposal. Our strength lies in controlling rational action by any means. In this case, the disadvantages of opposing me outweigh the advantages. Just some food for thought. This was a lesson that I already knew well. I learned it growing up with Gabe as a stepfather, with the teachers and kids in school, and with the gods that wanted to use me to clean up their messes. I even learned it again during the past year here. It was a lesson that I knew very well. I guess I see what you mean. But what are you lecturing me for? Good question. Mori looked at me with an ominous smirk. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Chuya watching our exchange, looking at us like a hungry beast. The teen didn't like be the subject of a lesson for some punk. Still, he didn't make a move. A disadvantage that outweighs the advantage, huh? The teen growled, focusing his glare on the doctor. We can trade info. If it benefits me, you two go first. I'll decide what to do after. For someone that hates the title, he acts like such a king. Mori gave the boy a con artist smile as he explained the investigation, going all the way from the 3 sightings to the eyewitness that I found. His 4th appearance was when he blew you two away with those black flames. It feels somehow connected. Do you know anything about that? I watched as the small teen stared at the mafia boss for servers moments before simply replying, "The D-ad don't come back to life." I wanted to smirk at how sure he sounded. If he knew anything about the world that I come from, he wouldn't be saying things like that. I agree. That would put doctors out of business. Otherwise, however, the evidence seems to tell a different story. Take a look at this. Chuya and I watched as Mori unlocked his desk and took out a video player about the size of the man's palm. The boss placed it on the desk and turned the device on. An image of the bird-eyes view of a room lined floor to ceiling and cash appeared on the screen. Mori explained that this was footage from the mafia's vault, the place where half of the mafia's assets are hidden away, and one of the most difficult places to break into in the mafia. Just when the sight started to get unbearably dull, a shadowy figure started weaving between the stacks of bills. "That's impossible," I lightly gasped. The shadowy figure was startlingly familiar. It looked up at the surveillance camera, eyes gleaming with hatred. The figure was an elderly man, wearing the same tattered clothes that he'd been buried in. The merciless tyrant of the night. The old man looked at the camera, seemingly knowing just how any of you seeing this must be feeling at the sight of him. "I have risen." The deep voice crackled like flames. It felt as if the room had gotten colder when he spoke, as if the voice had stolen all of the warmth for itself. "I have risen from the raging flames of hell. Do you know why, Doctor?" We watched it as the man's figure flickered slightly like a mirage, the body of someone simmering in heat. I felt my heart chill at the sight of the man. "It is anger, fury born from resentment," he explained. The body spoke of a devouring wrath that summoned him to incite more. "The black flames, the powerful divine beast Ar-Habaki, is the very embodiment of rage itself. I will fulfill its wishes and have my revenge as I sow even more anger. Tremble as you try to sleep, and regret ever killing me." On the screen, massive flames poured from the body, devoting and melting the stacks of bills and the walls themselves. Then the screen went black, the footage stopping there. "This is all the footage that we have on him," Mori explained. "The only people who know it exists are the head of security, one executive, and myself. There is a very strict gag order in place, but even that might not be enough. There's no promise that he won't repeat this performance elsewhere. I looked at Mori with a stiff expression. This was a dangerous situation for the two of us to be in. What are you going to do if he gives an encore? I have a good idea what would happen. In this, he made it clear that his death was not by illness, but by assassination. If any of his supporters were to find out, a third of our men would turn on me. Win or lose, the mafia would be finished. I looked at the blank screen, running through the information. Monsters come back from the dead all the time, but even in most resurrection myths, things like this don't happen. This isn't the work of some god or goddess. Not even an angry titan could do something like this. No matter the mythology, the deities have kept a low profile for the past hundreds of years. That's why they're considered myths. The mist makes sure of that. This is someone else. I heard Mori ask what Arahabaki was, but he was met with silence. I did a little research myself. Legend has it Arahabaki was a servant deity, the god of Habaki, a god so old that he predates Japanese mythology, making its origins remain unclear. Apparently, no one even knows how the name was originally written. As such, there are numerous variations of the god according to local legends across the country. Well, that saves me from having to do my own research. Do you seriously believe in gods? Chuya said, seemingly mockingly. There was something about his tone that made the question feel off. No, Mori said bluntly. I believe only what I can see for myself, which is why I can't deny that the man in the footage looked exactly like the old boss. Believe only what you can see for yourself, huh? I wonder how he would react if I told him that the secret to abilities that he's been chasing lies in what he just claimed to not believe in. It's no coincidence that you're searching for Arahabaki. My guess is that you heard the same rumors that we did and went searching for the truth. I watched the boy's eyes quickly dart around the room, his nervousness evident. So he is related to the god in some more personal way, I thought. Rumors are a good source, but they're just that, rumors. This seems more like an obsession of his than anything. This obsession is built on hard evidence. I could see the hesitation in Chuya's eyes before he finally answered. Who knows what? True, he said, evading. We get a lot of drifters. There's no way to pin down where the rumor started. But anyways, do you know where Suribachi came from? The city? Mori asked, raising an eyebrow. I could tell that he didn't understand the seemingly sudden change in conversation. It was built within a crater formed at the end of the conflict. The cause of the explosion remains unknown. It was Arahabaki, supposedly, Chuya says, cutting the mafia boss off. I could see the way that the boy grimaced. Obviously, he didn't mean to sound so sure. Chuya went on to tell a well-fabricated, but obviously outlandish story about a rumor the sheep had heard regarding the explosion. He told Mori about a foreign soldier that had been captured and tortured at a secret military base there. He said that the soldier had died, but his rage had summoned Arahabaki from hell. Regardless, the resurrected soldier kill led the torturer he despised. More specifically, he blew up the entire facility along with all the soldiers, and that explosion created Suribachi. Mori cut. I see. Yeah. Arahabaki's power is too great to be contained in one person, so the soldier lost his mind and turned into an uncontrollable monster. They say the flames consumed him and the ground below him till there was nothing left. The return of an angry god. What do you think, Dazai? About what? I shrugged, laying the disbelief on thick. It's impossible. Grudges beyond the grave. Souls? Yeah, right? Someone's just making stuff up for cheap thrills. Gods, monsters, ghosts. Of course, I know that they're all real, but the thing was, even if they wanted to, they couldn't show themselves like this. The mythological world is kept separate from the mortal world by the mist. That's why those born without the sight believe that the myths are just that, myths. Even if skill users have the sight, there aren't enough of them to make up all of the eyewitnesses and put Arahabaki behind this. Besides, there's no way that a deity is just going to let a soul come back from the dead. Even in Greek myths, when something like this happens, there's always a catch that stops them from being able to do it, or that shortly returns them. Mori's expression turned serious. Nonetheless, my predecessor did kill a lot of people and died filled with anger. That much matches up. Furthermore, he clearly mentioned Arahabaki by name in the footage. No ordinary person would be able to sneak past the vault's top security. Then the answer is simple, I decided. It's a skill. Someone with a skill that we don't know about made that footage. All they had to do after that was take advantage of the rumors about Arahabaki and make it seem like the old boss came back to life. Why would anyone do that? Seriously, such a stupid question. Isn't it obvious? To make people believe you assassinated your predecessor. There was also the problem of Chibi over here. But I'll let that rest for the moment and destroy the mafia. Mori sighed and shook his head. The exhausted look came back to his face. Death returns upon the murder, as they say. Dazai, this is an order. Find who's behind all this before they do the same thing they did in the video in front of my predecessor's supporters. Got it? I guess I can help. After all, they'd end up tutoring me to death for being your accomplice if they ever found out. I agreed. I'd known for a bit that this might be the case. The possible to retort. They'd make sure to nab me before I could painlessly kill myself. We don't have much time, though. I hope you're sure about sending me alone. I'm not, the bastard replied, smirking. Chuya here is going to help you. The ginger and I locked eyes as we both shouted in unison. What? I could feel a heat creeping up my neck and cheeks at the thought of spending that much time with him. This could not happen. The hell is wrong with you? You look into DI? I oughta. No. Anyone but him. I'd kick your ass, you. Do so much better on my own. Piece of shit. Stop shouting over each other. Mori interrupted, raising his voice to be heard. I watched as he eyed both of us. Maybe I could just rip those eyes out. Chuya, I trust that you understand you're in no position to refuse. Oh, come on, Mori, that's I shouted. Don't get cocky, you damn octopus. Downright dirty. Screw you. Yes, Mori said, waving his hand in a dismissing manner. I could tell that he was refusing to engage with our yelling, even if it was all pointed at himself. Annoying bastard. I have several reasons for pairing you up. First, someone outside of the mafia will have an easier time investigating these rumors given how dangerous they are to the organization. In addition, I need someone to keep an eye on Chuya so he doesn't betray us. That's where your nullification skill comes in, Dazai. And the last, most important reason is, I could feel myself lean forward, and could see Chuya unconsciously doing the same thing. However, when Mori spent the next few moments letting the words sit on his tongue and his face morphed into a grin, I knew exactly what was coming. A secret. The hell? Chuya growled. Simply consider it a grown man's intuition. I watched as Mori's lips curled into a mysterious smirk. It made me want to learn to sew just so I could sew them together. Get along. You two. That's an order. If I hear you're neglecting your duties because you can't make nice, well, no need to explain, yes? He slowly smiled at us once more. An invisible chill swept through the room. In moments like this, I wondered if the thing to ward off evil that Grover showed me would work on the mafia boss. Who knows? It just kill him. Maybe not even sewing, stitching his lips together should work. So, do you understand? Silence rang through the air. Do you understand? Yes, we mumbled. Just loud enough for the old man to hear. Good. Then go. I'm expecting great things from you too. Chibi and I turned and made our way to the door at the dismissal. Chuya put himself on my blind side, making it harder to gauge where the small teen was as we shoved each other back and forth on the way out. There was no friendliness in the action, and yet it reminded me of when I'd frisked Annabeth. Then again, there was no friendliness between her and I in those early days, either. I shook my head before my mind could go to a dangerous place. It always seemed to do this around the small ginger. Let's just get this over with. Sadly, this video is now over. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this.